Welcome back to the Built on Purpose podcast. I'm your host, Max Hansen, the CEO of Wise Guys, where we find purpose-aligned and performance-proven leaders. Speaking of, today our guest is Eric Partaker, a peak performance coach, entrepreneur, and author of the Amazon bestseller, The Three Alarms. With a background that spans from advising Fortune 50 CEOs of McKinsey to helping scale Skype into a global success, Eric now helps leaders worldwide reach their potential. Through his coaching, he's on a mission to empower 100 million people to become the best versions of themselves by 2030. He has incredible content that we'll get into. Eric, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Max. And it's amazing that it's great to be reminded of our purpose.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk more about that for sure. Let's start out. I just like a short softball. You and I obviously had a couple minutes to catch up prior to this, which was awesome. What's the best thing going on in your life right now?
God, there's so many. There's a few things. And it kind of relates to like my view on the world, that we can't just overtrack like on the work front. We have to take this like three-pillared approach. It's not just about our work and wealth, our wealth, it's like our health, wealth, and relationship. So I'll give you one in each. So on the health front, I have struggled on and off with sleep for my whole life. Like I struggle to sleep deeply enough. I'll wake up, I might need to use the bathroom. I start thinking about something and then like my brain's on for like an hour and a half, 2 hours. And I just couldn't figure out like how to remedy that. So I'd go through good periods and then bad periods. And then I came across Andrew Huberman's sleep cocktail, like the supplement stack.
Oh yeah.
Like it's simple stuff like magnesium, L-theanine, apigenin. I've been sleeping I'm getting like the best sleep in my life now, which is great, right? So it's like, instead of it being up and down and hoping for a good period, it's just like kind of like nice and stable though. So that's good. That's a big thing. Second thing I would say is, my two boys. I got a 19-year-old and 11-year-old, and I'm a coach and mentor, right, to others, and I've suddenly started to like really lean in about providing that like same coaching and mentoring to my boys, and so I'm helping my 19-year-old in school right now, kind of like get on a good path, doing his best and helping teaching like some of these basic peak performance principles to him, like the foundation of like really, really strong, habits. And that if you take care of the inputs, the outputs, come later. He's only like 19 and I never had somebody like me, helping train me at that age. So it's like, I almost feel like this is this incredible gift to be giving them. And that's like very like motivating and inspiring for me at the same time. And even with my 11-year-old, I'm teaching them like concepts of like anti-fragility, the things that stress us can actually make us stronger, and the power of a growth mindset, all that. So that's super cool. It's like actually becoming a coach and mentor for my boys. And then the third thing, so on the work front, so I've been doing I've done a bunch of different things, but lately in the last few years, I've been doing a lot of one-to-one, coaching and mentoring for CEOs. Sure. Which is fun, but it's kind of like limiting, right? You can't reach a big number of people with that. But then I just created this new thing called the CEO Accelerator, where I like integrate company building, leadership development, and peak performance all in one thing. And we're running our first cohort now. We have like 78 already on the wait list for the second one. Which launches in January, and it's just so much fun. It's like we're it's the start of an ed tech that we're making here, focused on the SMB leader space, and it's just exhilarating, seeing it all come together, and also too seeing like how positively it's being received by the participants. So those that's you never get a short answer from me.
No, I love it. There's a lot there. I mean, I have a 19-year-old in college too, and this is just good. I'm kind of learning as we're talking about this. And that's what I was looking forward to on this was, when you get to talk to a coach or somebody that's coached a lot of CEOs, I get to be coached for free while I'm, gathering information for everybody else, that are also getting coached. But so this is wonderful. And, got me thinking that I don't know if I do enough coaching and mentoring with my 19-year-old. I mean, he's in Dallas. He's a few hours away from here. So it's just a good reminder, that, that to take everything you're learning professionally and apply it, personally. How would you I know this might be a very basic and broad question, but I love people when they explain this, but who are you? I gave a little bit of your background. I love your background. Obviously you've scaled a company, you've done some really cool stuff, but how would you describe you today?
Very different from who I thought I was, right? So, the first half of my career, I thought I was naturally super extroverted. And that I was, a chronic procrastinator, unable to focus, a bit all over the place. And in this back half of my career, I've realized that I'm actually a quite deep, reflective thinker. I prefer more time on my own rather than, in a large room with others. I rather work with a very small group of people, rather than, a large group as from a working team point of view. I really care about what people are feeling and experiencing around me. Right. And especially those that I feel that I'm responsible for, and I like to think of myself now as, the home of the second chance, because I think we all need a second chance in life. I certainly did. And I think lots of people out there want a second chance, right? Because we never get it right the first time in life and in work and in business and with our families and in our relationships and, frankly, even with, parenting, right? We don't get it right the first time. We learn. So yeah, I'm the home of the second chance.
Ah, man, I love that. I love that. When you think about so a lot of leaders out there that I run into, and I'm sure you coach, a lot of them are moving very quickly. And what I've recognized, and again, asking for a friend, but I run into this all the time, that I feel like I'm moving so fast that I have to remind myself that I'm never really going to be happy or feel like I won unless I can slow down, which it sounds like you're more reflective now, probably in a better place, definitely in a better place to coach people and, kind of teach them that type of framework. But do a lot of the people you coach, that they run into that same problem where they're just chasing something so relentlessly that they have a hard time slowing down? And when they have that problem, how do you coach them in order to implement mechanisms to be more reflective and slowing down?
Yeah. So there's no magic solution for it. I think one of the skills with coaching and mentoring is that you have to meet the person, where they're at. And, my 19-year-old is very different personality from the 11-year-old. And the things that work with my 19-year-old, don't work with the 11-year-old. So I think, in that sense, you have to help someone, you have to ask the right questions just to make sure that you understand, you actually know, what are their 80/20s. And what I mean by that is, what are the 20% of things that person needs to focus on for 80% of the improvement that, they're seeking. And, when I run programs, for example, coaching and mentoring programs, and I ask people, what are the tools, concepts that most resonated with you? Everyone says different things. So I think that's super important, is just to recognize that you need to just ask questions. And then based on what the person is saying, sometimes, to get somebody to slow down, you need to paint the negative consequences to them. So you need to paint the picture of what's going to happen health-wise if they don't. how their relationships or the things dear to them might deteriorate or implode, or how they might actually get worse results on the work front if they're to continue on like that. But I think too, with it all, you have to be realistic. I don't think you build anything or create anything, of significance by constantly, doing the same thing over and over and over in a perfect routine sort of way. The way I look at it is that, like, the ideal routine creates the foundation from which you can launch these missions, where the missions might require, more effort from you than you would normally give. I mean, just take an Olympic event, for example. The person is training to go absolutely all out for one moment in 4 years. And they wouldn't be able to go absolutely all out in that same one moment all the time. That's not sustainable, right? Mm-hmm. But their training allows them, to do that for that one month. So sometimes we do need to sprint, and sometimes your routines don't work out. There isn't really a one size fits all answer to it. You kind of have to really ask the questions to understand the person's 80/20s, and then come up with very practical things that they could do to, address those issues, but also respecting the fact that they may be in a period of time where, to capture this opportunity, they do need to be sprinting. They do need to go all out, because they're trying to win the 100-meter, and you're not going to win it unless you go all out. Right.
Right. Is there a common in, all the coaching, which is, a lot? What is the most common challenges that you see for leaders? I know it's, like you said, different leaders at different points, but is there anything that you see, just in general, that you've noticed that's maybe different, in this day and age versus when you started your coaching?
Well, interestingly enough, no, not really. It's actually more that there's these timeless things, so I find that, so when leaders are frustrated, usually it's always the same set of things leading to the frustrations. So, they haven't narrowed their focus properly. And so, if everything's important, nothing's important. Again, back to the 80/20 rule. They haven't thought, okay, what are the 20% of things I can focus on for 80% of the growth that I'm trying to create within the company? Or they haven't asked the question, if everything were to, stay at its current level of performance, where's the one area where change would have the greatest impact? Forcing yourself to narrow your focus. So I think they often struggle with that. I see people issues all the time. Basically, the hardest variable and the most important to master in the building of anything is getting the people right, from my point of view. Yeah. And if you don't have the people, I mean, certainly it's probably your point of view as well, right? Within your line of business. I'm doing a little infomercial for you now.
Oh, I love this. Who don't?
No, but it's the truth, right? I've hired over 2,000 people in my career, so I definitely know how important it is to get this factor right. And people struggle. And I think the reason they struggle is because they actually don't properly define what it is that they're looking for. And they don't have that properly mapped against what is the role. And then even if they have thought of the role, maybe they thought about it from an activity point of view, but not what are the outcomes that you want, that role or that person to achieve. And then even if they thought that all out, it doesn't map to an interview or an assessment process or anything. And so long story short is that they keep throwing darts at the board blindfolded, hoping they're going to hit a bullseye. And then of course you don't. You take the blindfold off and you're like, man, that person didn't work out. I don't know why. So I think, narrowing focus, not getting, not putting the right time and effort into people. And then I'd say the last timeless thing that I see all the time relates to time. People don't use their time well, it is literally the most it's the scarcest resource on the planet. Once a second's gone, it's completely irrecoverable, right? And so, I'll have a session with somebody and they'll complain about, I'm not doing the things that I should be doing. And okay, well, open up your calendar. Can you show me where you've scheduled the time in the past weeks to work on the things that you're complaining about? Ugh, none of that's scheduled. And it's, well, how on earth are you going to, it's like being upset that you didn't meet with somebody, but you never scheduled the meeting and they didn't even know that there was a meeting.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's these are the basics, but the basics are hard, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Simplification and basics are hard. I want to jump in to the framework of your book because I think there's going to be so much. I don't want to give away too much because I do want people to read the book. But I think the framework is like anything, simple, but, also difficult to execute. So I don't think we'll, spoil it too much for them. But before we do, one thing I want to jump into just a little bit, just so people have kind of a foundation of who you are and where you came from. And honestly, this is kind of something selfishly that I want to learn from you is your background is interesting. Obviously, you graduated from University of Illinois, went to work from McKinsey, then went to work for Skype and moved to London. You were in London, obviously, for many years. And then 5 years ago, now you're in Portugal. Talk about that's not a traditional, most people, that's not the route that they go. They don't, raise a family in another country. Talk about that, your background, how that was and some learnings from it. Cause I think it fascinates me, as we were talking earlier before this, there's a lot of questions I wanted to ask and I think everybody should kind of hear cause not everybody gets the opportunity to, raise their kids differently or at least, grow up in different cultures. And so I want to start to understand how that was, things you've learned, things that you miss, things that you don't miss, all those types of things.
Yeah. I mean, I've always liked this quote from John Lennon, life is what happens while you're busy making other plans. And growing up as a kid, we moved 13 times, between Norway, US, various places in Chicago. I'm half Norwegian, half American. And, I went to, I don't know how many different schools, I don't know, I must have went to, by the time I graduated high school, I think I'd been to 8 schools. So moving around and having to adjust quickly to new settings, environments, and form relationships quickly. Necessity is the mother of invention. I had no choice. And then, I don't know, nature versus nurture, what was I that way to begin with? And then it was easy for me to adapt, or did I become that way? But at any rate, it started to, it started to manifest in various ways. So, for example, I decided to, when I was at University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, I decided I wanted to study abroad. And so I went into the study abroad office. And, she's like, oh, yeah, we got this great programs in Spain and then, France and then the UK. And I said, no. What's the one program you have here that the least amount of people go to? And then she's like, that the least amount of people go to. And I'm like, yeah, what's that? And she's like, oh, that would be this program in Belgium. And I'm like, oh, that's where I'll go. And so I just made decisions based on that, that it was unique, different, and off the beaten path. I knew nothing about Belgium, at the time. And then that just, I guess it flowed into my professional life in that it allowed me to not really think much about moving countries, shifting cultures, changing industries. So my first job was with McKinsey and Company, as you mentioned, in the Chicago office. Then I transferred to the Oslo, Norway office. Then I ran a nonprofit in Norway for a while. Then I moved to London. I was part of the early team at Skype. We had this rocket ship journey. We had a big exit to eBay for a few $1 billion. It's back when people used to use Skype. And then I built a chain of Mexican restaurants, simply because I was missing Mexican food. And And I thought, okay, well, I'll build, the chain that doesn't exist. And then we became, Zagat, #1 Mexican restaurant, in the UK. And then went to, moved down to, Portugal, started a coaching and mentoring business. 2 years ago, started posting on LinkedIn for the first time. That completely, took off. Was totally unexpected. Like 2 years ago, I had no idea that was going to happen. So I guess I'm intrigued by things that are different. I see benefit in mixing things up. So I'm not like a purist. I'm more like I don't need to play a particular instrument. I'm more like a DJ. It's like, I don't play any of the instruments. I just like figure out what sounds nice together and I mix it, and I think when you do that, you can start to see that there's a lot of like similarities and patterns that exist in the world, within cultures, countries, within businesses. And when you kind of can see that matrix, it all doesn't seem as different as you may think. And there's like kind of like almost like a fabric that's woven that connects it all. And it's just very interesting to see all these different expressions. So yeah, I could talk on and on about this, but at some point I might start sounding like a philosopher or something. So
No, this was fascinating to me. I mean, I have been fortunate enough to travel quite a bit. I was actually in Europe this past summer and started in Paris and ended up in Istanbul and stopped along a bunch of ways. But yeah, I mean, it sounds like the domino for you was the study abroad. And, that really kind of got that, kind of going. And the fact that you moved around a lot, probably you were just used to kind of seeing different stuff. Yeah, that sounds interesting. I mean, what, like, is in your head, is that kind of, when you look back, like one of the critical decisions you made that like kind of got you?
Definitely. Because, everything, it was like, wow, it's like everything's the same, but different. It's like they have streets and roads, but they look different. It's like people are hanging out, but they're hanging out in different ways. They're playing sports, but sports are different. Yeah. So it's like same, but different. And that was very exciting. Right. And then you start to see that everywhere. Same, but different, same, but different. And, that's the whole, variety is the spice of life thing. Right. So, but yeah, I'd say the study abroad thing was the catalyst for sure.
Is it safe to say that you're encouraging your son, who's 19, in university in the UK to study abroad somewhere?
Yeah, he is in the UK right now. And we, like last summer, my son went down to Kenya and he was there for 2 weeks. And they built a playground for a community that didn't have one. And that was like an eye-opening experience for him. Encouraged him to do that. I mean, both boys, they've traveled a ton. They speak multiple languages. They have multiple passports. Leo speaks, Norwegian, Portuguese, English, a bit of French. Alex, Norwegian, French, English. My wife is Brazilian. The kids have like multiple nationalities and passports. So we're trying to raise a very like global kind of like, the United Nations under a single roof, So, cause I think it's important. It gives them perspective, that, there is no one right answer.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you think about people that don't have that, because that makes me feel, as a parent, I'm like, man, I only speak one language. His kids speak 4. Like, I mean, so I have so much respect for people that, when they're speaking to me in their second language, and I'm kind of frustrated because I can't make out everything. And in my mind, I'm like, they're speaking to me in their second language, and I only speak one language. But when you coach people, you probably coach them all over the world. But is there, when somebody hasn't had that experience to travel and have, kind of what you've described that you've done and seen, what are the differences on like how they see the field, just in general?
Oh, well, they're just much more rigid in their thinking, much more closed-minded. Those types of folks, I think they tend to be easily, they have lower levels of resilience, I think, right? Because if the world doesn't perform and behave in the way that they think it should, then that creates like a lot of like stress, hardship, frustration for them. But when right from the outset that there's lots of flavors of ice cream, there is no one right answer for which three you're going to pick. And yeah, it just opens up that. I think that flexibility is important. Why I think that's extra relevant is we're literally at a time right now when you look at all these, new technologies coming together, from deep tech stuff to AI. And I mean, this is like the, industrial revolution. This is like the technology revolution. So what I mean with that is that human adaptability is going to like be an all-time high prerequisite for success. Like, you're going to have to be able to roll with the punches. You're going to have to live that quote of life is what happens while you're busy making other plans, because things are being upended and changed all the time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for those of you that don't know who Eric is, I highly suggest following your content. Your content, honestly, you're one of my favorite follows on LinkedIn. And just like when I open it up, everything's helpful, valuable, around leadership and just everything. So thank you for producing, such amazing content. And plus you in 2020, you published a book, called The 3 Alarms, a simple system to transform your health, wealth, and relationships forever. So I love how you kind of started out and broke down the question about what's the best thing going on in your life in those key areas. But I recommend everybody to go buy the book. I recommend everybody go follow him for sure on this content. It's amazing. But let's talk about like what sparked the idea for the 3 alarm system, because I think that will help us get into some other areas where I think will be really helpful for the audience in leadership development.
Yeah. So I started my career with McKinsey & Company, and I was, quickly doing 80, 90, sometimes 100-hour weeks. Then it was, helping build Skype, as mentioned. Then it was trying to build a restaurant chain, which is honestly like one of the most grueling work period I ever went through in my life. I remember it was the first 3 months of building the very first, getting that very first restaurant open. Going to bed at midnight and then waking up at 3:30. So that you could get to like the local market in time and get like some of the ingredients that you needed, because you didn't have proper, supplier relationships, and you're just, hacking it all together yourself. And I remember those 3 months, like I thought like I was shaking. I thought I was like in a physically, like, I don't know, like implode. Like it was just so exhausting. And I just kept sacrificing myself on that altar of success. And, I mentioned earlier how it's important to have that strong foundation so that you can, launch your missions, right? Okay, I got to go all out on this particular goal. But that can only be like 20% of your time, right? And so you can count that in different ways, but like in simple terms, 365 days a year, so 20%, of that is what, 73 days. So, like 2.5 months a year, whether it's like all at once, it'd be quite, a feat for like a few, 3-week sprints or whatever. There's times when you have to go all out, but it has to be contained. And for me, it was just not contained. It was just all out all the time. And I was on a flight back to, the UK, from Spain, and and the plane, ascends, and then I start to feel this like pressure building up in my chest. And then I'm starting to sweat. It's quite painful in my jaw, left arm. My arm goes completely like cold. I'm feeling nauseous. Long story short, flight attendant realizes, something is going down. And she asks if there's a doctor on board. Doctor comes over, takes my vital signs and says, we need to land the plane immediately. He's having a heart attack. And thankfully, he was there to kind of provide that direction. And I thought like it was going to be lights out completely. The descent felt like an eternity. Like I remember thinking, please fly faster. Cause I thought like my heartbeat felt so faint, almost like almost barely detectable. Like just like, ooh, and I was like, shit, this is it. And I felt so guilty and so regretful in that moment. Cause I was like, cause I had put myself in that situation. And I thought, I'm not going to, my 19-year-old was, a young boy at the time. Like, I'm not going to see him again. And the plane emergency lands. They had blocked off a runway in France. And plane emergency lands, and there's an ambulance waiting on the runway, and they take me straight into the ambulance, and they administer nitrates right there on the runway. So they administer nitrates, right there on the runway, and I remember I looked up into the eyes of the paramedic looking down at me, and I just said, "Please don't let me die. I have a 5-year-old son." That's the 19-year-old now, and it was interesting because, when you think it's going to be lights out, like whatever you truly care about, like you can't fake it. Like your heart is going to speak. Right. And that was most important to me. And the paramedic, said, we'll just relax. I think we got to you in time. And then, the next day I woke up in the hospital and I just started to think about the things that I needed to do and change. And obviously, realized that I still wanted to become all that I was capable of being, which is the premise behind the book, The 3 Alarms, is that our deepest fulfillment in life comes from playing the game that we're capable of playing, operating at our fullest potential. That's how I define peak performance. And Abraham Maslow in his work, he estimated that only 2% of people do this in the world. So I wanted to kind of get into that 2% club, but the way I was pursuing it was obviously unhealthy and completely wrong. And so I started to take, a more balanced approach. And I just thought, very practically speaking, I thought, okay, well, how did I get into this situation? I mean, my work was still going to be important, obviously, I need to work, but how did I get into that situation? My health. I wasn't paying attention to my health. And then what were the first words that came out of my mouth when I thought it was game over? It was nothing. It wasn't my health or my work. It wasn't like, please don't let me die. I need to clear out my inbox. It was, I have a 5-year-old son. So relationships are critical. And I thought, maybe that's the 80-20. I keep talking about 80-20, the 20% of areas that you could focus on to, find 80% of the improvement that you're seeking in life. Optimize your health, your wealth, and your relationships. And by wealth, I mean both, what you do to make the money and what you do with it thereafter. Future alt work if you want. And then that started the change process. And it took some time, but the process started.
Amazing. I mean, how old were you when that happened? Just 8 years ago?
So 14 years ago. I'm 49 now. Well, I'll be 48. I'll be 49. So I was 36 years old, right? Or 34 years old, right? So pedal to the metal, right? I mean, that shouldn't be happening at that age.
Yeah. I'm doing the math. We're almost the same age, and we have kids that are the same age, so we're on the same. I'm a lot more gray than you though, for some reason. But when you think about this, the model,
Blonde hair, I get gray.
It's true. The Norwegian. So when you think about the model, so they're and again, you can go read this through the book and get more detail, but the book kind of dives into three core principles, about identity and productivity and anti-fragility that it gets into. Talk about how that starts you down the path of the health. And then did you naturally get into the framework in the book, and then how did you kind of live it out in your own life?
Yeah. So it's like a matrix. You got your health, wealth, relationships, but then there's three things that you layer on top to reach your full potential. And it's linked to the acronym IPA. So like the beer, but better for you. And the first thing is just getting your identity right. And what I mean by identity is like recognizing that you don't have to become the person that you want to become bottoms up. Like you can build lots of behaviors that prove you are that person. And that's an important way to go about doing it. But it's not the only way. You can also be, top down in your approach. And this is an ability that we all have, but we lose around, I don't know, the age of like 13, 14. For example, when I bought my son a Captain America shield and the shield arrived and I presented it to him, like I didn't need to sit him down and be like, okay, Leo, now we're going to do Captain America behavioral training so that you know how to act with this shield, right? I mean, he just got the shield. He, immediately became the character. And kids, we're all great at this, just taking on an identity, and that informs the behaviors. And so if that's the case, if we've done it in the past, we can do it again. And so on the identity side of things, it literally is you starting to live a more intentional life by coming up with a name that describes this superhero version of you, however you want to call that, you at your best, in each of those three areas: on the health front, on the wealth front, on the home front. And so, me at my best on the health front is world fitness champion. I'm not a world fitness champion, but like that's the person who goes to the gym in the morning. And so when I don't feel like going, well, what would a world fitness champion do? He would go anyway. When I'm there and I'm like kind of push out the reps and I'm getting exhausted, like this little voice will go on in my head. Okay, watch what he's about to do next. This is what separates the world's best from the rest. And I'm like, I thought I was going to stop at the 7th rep, and I get to like 12. So that superhero version of me helps me be more intentional on the health front and show up at my best, even if I don't feel like it. And what I've done, the 3 alarms thing, is that I've literally just set an alarm and named the alarm each of these identities, and then set the alarm to go off at the time of day that would most benefit from being powered by that best self identity. So at 6:30 a.m., that's when World Fitness Champion goes off on my phone. Again, to make me think very, very intentionally, how am I going to show up in my gym session right now? And then 9 a.m., the next one goes off. It says world's best coach, just to prompt me at 9 a.m. so that I think, okay, well, how decisive, inspiring, and reliable do I need to be for the day ahead? And then the last one is at 6:30 p.m. It says world's best husband and father. Not that I am that, I'm not, but I'm living more intentionally though. And then that prompts the question, well, how would the world's best husband and father walk through that door right now? So yeah, the IPA, identity, productivity, and anti-fragility, and that identity piece is all about, being more intentional and showing up at your best in each of those 3 life domains.
Man, I love that framework. And like, I think the word that I don't hear a lot is the anti-fragility. Talk about that. Like, I mean, I know it because I've, read your stuff, but I don't talk about like how that became important, because that one kind of seems like the other two a little bit more straightforward. That one feels a little bit more modern. I don't know if that's even the right word, at least to me, but talk about like why that is important and, how it became important to you in order to, for the framework.
Yeah. It's especially important, I think, for entrepreneurs, leaders, for 2 reasons. One, Well, let's start with a quote from Mike Tyson. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. So, so one, things rarely go to plan. And then two, the things that we pursue and the things that we try to achieve, like all of that can be quite stressful. As well as the things that don't go to plan, like that could be quite stressful. And anti-fragility is the opposite of fragile. So fragile is, you take a few hits, you're going to break. And then you could say, okay, no, I'm robust. But by definition, well, that just means like, okay, you're stronger, but you're still going to break after so many hits. Resilience, you could say you're resilient, but then by definition, that just means you absorb shock and you return to the same. So what you really want to be is anti-fragile. And there's a book on this concept. Well, it's not a concept. It actually exists in the world, in the universe, anti-fragility, where things actually benefit from disorder, stress, and chaos, as crazy as that might sound. And anti-fragility is the true opposite of fragile, or anti-fragile is the true opposite of fragile, whereby the more hits you take, the stronger you become. And that as a concept is very foreign to people. And then they think that I'm drinking my superhero Kool-Aid when I say this. But thankfully their body doesn't think so, because our bodies respect and our temples of anti-fragility. So some quick examples would be, how do you build an immune system? You expose it to germs and bacteria. That's how you build it. How do you, or put it this way, who walks into a gym and says, can you please point me in the direction of the most comfortable weights? I'd like to get into the best shape of my life. Like that never said, right? So how do you grow a muscle? You stress it. So we actually just need to get what's going on for us in our bodies, physically, upstairs in our head, mentally. And it starts with reframing stress as something that's not actually bad, but something that's good for us. It's what builds our immune system. It's what strengthens us. And you can also callous the mind and then therefore become more adept at handling the things that don't go to plan and the things that stress you, and kind of like, alchemizing that challenge into growth. And that's a true game changer because, IPA, identity, productivity, anti-fragility. So you can define what best looks like in the areas of life that matter most. You can optimize yourself for productivity. And guess what? The majority of the time, things won't go to plan and you're going to be stressed. Life, that's just how things are. But if we look at so this is interesting study from the Upside of Stress by Kelly McGonigal. So if we look at people, 3 groups of people. So one group lives a relatively stress-free life. The second group experiences a high degree of stress, but views it positively. The third group, a high degree of stress, but views it negatively. So the question is, which group dies the soonest? And they followed these people throughout their lives. And let me flip the question. Which group lives the longest? It's the second group. The group that experiences a high degree of stress but views it positively actually outlives the group that lives a relatively stress-free life. And of course, the group that dies the soonest is high degree of stress but views it negatively. The point being, if you're constantly stressing yourself out, trying to avoid stress, you will die sooner. You're not going to get away from it. And, if you think life is just about taking it easy, sitting, I don't know, like on a yacht drinking pina coladas and not having any stress at all, you're going to die sooner too. So stress is not the issue. It's our view of stress. That's the issue. So we need to reframe the game and get what our bodies do upstairs in our head mentally. And then if you're a competitive person, well, then think, what does that do for you as a competitive advantage? Like, I know that, like, when I'm up against somebody, I'm like, I don't care how smart they are. I don't care what they've achieved. Like, I look at it and I go, you will not win because you may be smarter than me, but there's no way in hell that you'll outwork me or that you'll be able to, withstand what I can. And again, in the past, when I did that in the past, it was healthy and unsustainable, right? And so that led to the break. But now, because I get that proper foundation layer in place, sleep, nutrition, exercise. And because I treat stress as a friend rather than, an enemy, it allows you to, achieve that which, would put others, under the table.
Man, I love the framework. And what it gets me thinking about is, we're always vetting and we have to find our clients the best leaders and, ones that are proven. And I think, how would you think about that from evaluating somebody to like figuring out like what types of questions would you ask or how would you evaluate a leader on, I think the health is pretty easy. And that's something that is a little bit, faux pas, meaning like HR departments are not going to probably tell you that, hey, you can't hire somebody that's, physically not in good shape. That wouldn't be probably the ethical thing to do. But I do think it matters. I mean, somebody that's taking care of themselves, and then obviously the wealth and their work style is good. But the anti-fragility stuff really interests me. Like, what types of questions would you ask, and how do you evaluate somebody to see if, if they've got it or not?
Yeah. I mean, you can use a very basic one, like, so all the questions that I use, tend to be like behavioral based interviewing questions. And so, tell me about a time when is like a, simple construct for that. So, tell me about a time, when, and again, you keep it super simple. Tell me about a time when you faced a tough challenge, and leave it open-ended. Like, don't lead it anywhere. Just like, tell me about a time when you faced a tough challenge. And then, you can see in their answer, because there's a spectrum. And so with anti-fragility, they in their answer will be walking into the challenge, into the fire. If they're neutral, they're trying to like, keep at a distance, but, make sure that, things don't burn down, but they're not like in the house. Right. And then of course, if they're not that person, they're like, man, we hightailed it out of there, whatever the situation was, which might be the right answer, obviously, if it's a genuine safety issue. But yeah, seeing where they fall, it's sort of like, for example, here's another way, feedback. So nobody gets to the top without feedback. We all have blind spots, but the funny thing with blind spots is that they're only blind to you, right? They're not blind to everyone else. Everyone else, they're visible spots. Meaning that, let's say that your blind spots account for 20% of your potential, meaning that you can only reach a maximum 80% of who you are because you only know what you know. So you have to get feedback and you have to be open for it to close the gap from the 80 to 100 and become all that you're capable of being. And this I genuinely believe is true. And I would estimate those ratios are probably true as well. So the anti-fragile mind, so the robust mind, so we have fragile, robust, anti-fragile, right? Mm-hmm. So the fragile mind shies away from feedback. The robust mind is open to feedback. I can handle it. Yeah. Oh, yeah, feedback from me. Okay. Yeah. The anti-fragile mind doesn't take a passive approach to feedback. They take an active approach to feedback. What does that mean? They're not open to it. They solicit it. There's a very big difference there. And they don't wait for performance reviews. They don't wait for a prompt. I have some feedback for you. Is it okay, to share? No. They're saying things to the people that are managing them or to their peers like, look, and they're making it easy for their peers too. They may say something like, man, I really want to, I got something on my mind. Oh, what's in your mind? Well, I mean, hey, nobody's perfect, right? Friends like, or peers like, I'm not sure where this is going. No, of course not. Yeah. So we all can improve, right? Yeah, of course. And you would want to help me improve if you could, right? Yeah, definitely. Okay. So we all want to improve. You'd want to help me. So look, I'm sure I have blind spots, things that I can't see that if I worked on, would help me improve. And so I'm not perfect. You want to help me improve. I can only find out what these things are with your help. Can you help me? Can you give me just like 3 things? And don't hold back, because this is in pursuit of improvement, right? This is in pursuit of me becoming my best, which you want from me, I want from me. And having these types of conversations and then acting on the information, that's what the anti-fragile person does. So there's lots of ways in which you can kind of investigate, and discover the presence, of that trait. And even if it's not present, it can be developed, because sometimes people just need to reframe the game, right? So for example, when I said earlier that, hey, identity-driven change, you're already a master at it. You just forgot how to do it after the age of 13. So now I'm actually not teaching you something new. I'm just trying to get you to remember something that you used to do. That's a lot easier. So, we can reactivate, these abilities. So the way I do that with anti-fragility is by getting them to recognize that they're already doing it in their body. So we just got to get it upstairs in their head. Yeah, I don't know. Is that helpful?
Oh, very helpful. I mean, my head's like it's spinning just because there's a lot of alignment on values, and when you think about leadership, what percentage of leaders, when you think about coaching, like high level CEOs, what percentage of leaders does that come natural, like where they're already they know it's important, from your experience?
Oh, very well. It didn't even come naturally for me, right? So, I was an open to feedback versus solicit feedback kind of person. I was, I can like weather the challenge rather than like, bring it on. I'm going to step into it. So I meet very few people who are truly anti-fragile by default. It usually requires some type of prompting and encouragement. But the moment you explain it in the same way that for the people listening right now, like when I explain this, like there's no denying the power of it, right? It's like, you're like, oh, yeah, okay. If I could be more willing to step into discomfort rather than be open to it and tolerate it or step away from it, I'll probably have a better chance of reaching my fullest potential if I'm more willing to actively step into it, right? It's like logical when you hear it. So most people don't have it, but pretty much everyone can develop it.
Yeah, it's kind of that growth mindset that, I think we mentioned before. And I think it's super important. I think we have a leadership model where being a relentless learner, developing others, driving results, but that, having a relentless learning mindset, and that mindset's, incredibly, incredibly important.
Yeah.
What else from, in the work that you do and, from the book and the concepts, what else would you say that you've learned from all the coaching you've done that would be relevant and helpful for leaders that are, wanting to get better and up their game?
Well, so like if you're at the helm of a company and you're trying to scale a company, another thing is to recognize that like the company is the hardware. And if you want to get the hardware to operate correctly, you have to code the software correctly. And the software are 2 other pillars that you have to scale in parallel to the company. And that's your leadership. Like, are you leading to your fullest potential? And then you, the self, are you operating to your full potential? And so really to scale, you need to, you need to work on all 3 pillars simultaneously. So this is another set of 3 things, right? So you need to scale the company, your leadership, and self. And if we want to stick to an entrepreneurship example, there's an A to B journey in each of these. So it's from startup to scale up. It's from founder to CEO, and it's from current to best self. And the reason why this is important is because I've seen, from my days at McKinsey working with some of the, most well-known, biggest companies in the world, to Skype, to building the restaurant chain. I've worked, helped, it must be, well, now with the CEO Accelerator program, it's got to be like over 200, CEOs now. When I look back at, the validation for scaling those 3, it's simply because there's plenty of times where I've seen companies where the company looks great from the outside, but then you get in on the inside and you realize that the leadership is toxic. or company's great, leadership seems great, but when you sit down with the leaders and you really dig deep, you realize that they're not as productive as they could be. They don't have that anti-fragility stuff going on, so they're secretly quite stressed, ready to burn out. Health might be all over the place. Home front's a mess. So you have to, scale all three to reach your full potential, with your company, with your business.
Yeah. No, I would 100% agree. Well, we're approaching, I know I've kept you for a long time, and this has been absolutely amazing.
And a fun conversation.
Yeah, no, it's been amazing. If you don't mind, I'm just going to throw some questions at you. I don't normally do this, but I feel like you're a wealth of information and knowledge with your experience, well-traveled. So going back, what's the most interesting place you've ever traveled to and why? From a cultural standpoint and just in general.
I think Brazil. So my wife is Brazilian, and it is such a fun, loving, vibrant, musical, really social culture. You can't, whenever we go to Brazil and hang out with, my wife's family and our siblings, and it's just such a fun, just very happy time, lots of laughter. And it just reminds you of what life is really about, because it's so easy, especially if you're type A like me, I'm sure you are. And as many of the listeners, are, we're constantly what could I feed into the achievement grinder? And I'm never going to strip that part of me out. Right. But what I had to do was optimize it and make sure that it wasn't going to kill me, but it's still there. And with Brazil though, it's, it just reminds you of there's this whole other side to the planet, to society, to life, where achievement does not feature, where it's just about connection and warmth and smiles, laughs, relationships. And Brazil has that in large quantities.
Yeah, that's amazing. What about, again, these are in no order. I just feel like they'll be fascinating to get your input on it. What's the most rewarding part about coaching leaders for you?
I think that moment where you see the light bulb go off in their head and they're like, whoa, never thought about it that way. And so when you can actually influence somebody's thinking in such a way that it creates a shift or a permanent change of perspective, that's incredibly empowering. And when you can empower someone else, that is incredibly motivating for yourself. Right. So when we talk about LinkedIn, you mentioned, and again, for those listening who aren't aware, so I started a post for the first time on LinkedIn in January of 2023, and it's November of 2024. So we're, 22 months in, and the account is 840,000 followers now, soon to be 1 million. It's one of the fastest growing in the world. And it's been an exhilarating experience because when you say thought leadership, every leader, every, person in charge of a team can be a thought leader, because thought leadership is nothing more than helping people think in the right ways, changing perspective, shifting your view on the world. And it's one of the most powerful gifts that you can give somebody. Because everything, whether, Henry Ford, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're exactly right.
Yeah.
So, and any leader or manager can do this on their team. You don't need to be, an influencer, on a social media platform. But yeah, that's the most exciting thing when you see the light bulb go off.
Yeah. And for those of you that don't follow him, I highly encourage you do that. What's your go-to morning routine for productivity?
It's changed over the years. So I used to be quite rigid. And I mentioned earlier about like really getting my sleep in order. And I've actually changed up my routine so that I'm not trying to. So I sleep as much as I need to sleep. And if for some reason I've gotten to bed later, then I will wake up later. And my morning routine now is to prioritize that I've gotten as close ideally to 8 hours of sleep as possible. And that means sometimes in the morning I might wake up and have time to, do a bit of reading, do some meditation, plan and think through the day. Other times it means that I wake up and I'm just, helping out with my son, the youngest one, which I do every morning anyway, but like, that's like the only thing that I'm, pretty much doing. And then the workday starts. Old me used to get very upset about that. No, the routine's the routine. Can't break the routine. New me is like, gotta stop to smell the roses, Like things don't go exactly to plan, right? So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at the moment.
Man, I love those. I love those. Well, thank you so much for all your time today. You've been listening to the Built on Purpose podcast brought to you by Y Scouts. You can listen to all of our future and past podcasts at yscouts.com. Again, Eric, it's been an absolute pleasure. You are a wealth of knowledge. Please go pick up his book, follow him on LinkedIn. And how else does everybody get a hold of you if they want to reach out and get some coaching or anything else, or join your
just head over to my website, Eric with a C, Partaker, just like it sounds, ericpartaker.com, and join the email list, because if you like insights like this, like I share one super practical thing every single week that you can implement for immediate benefit. And then that's an easy way for us to stay in touch too. And then you'll be like looped in whenever there's like a new program or an opportunity. You'll be the first to know if you're on the list.
Awesome. And again, this is one of my favorite follows. And I don't tell people that very often at all. So it really legitimately is. So thanks again for your time today.
Thanks a ton. Appreciated it, Max. Thank you.